Tom had never been one to think much about money beyond what was needed to get by. He was 50, living a modest life, and never really questioned whether there was more to financial security than working his 9 to 5, paying bills, and trying to save when possible. Investing? That was for Wall Street types and finance experts, not for an average guy like him. His knowledge of the stock market was non-existent, and honestly, it hadn't seemed important. Until one day, everything changed. It was a random evening after work, and Tom was flipping through TV channels, searching for something to distract him. His life had fallen into a predictable routine: work, eat, sleep, repeat. But that night, he stumbled onto a documentary about investing, specifically dividend investing. He hadn't planned on watching it, but the simple idea that you could receive regular income just by owning certain stocks caught his attention. They talked about how some investors lived entirely off dividends, getting paid from the profits of large companies without having to do any additional work. As the narrator explained the concept of compounding, how reinvesting dividends could grow your portfolio faster than you might expect, Tom's mind buzzed with the possibilities. It was like a light bulb had flicked on in his head. Suddenly, everything he thought he knew about money seemed incomplete. That night, Tom couldn't stop thinking about the documentary. He'd never considered that investing could be accessible to someone like him. He always assumed it was complicated, requiring insider knowledge or huge amounts of money to get started. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that he might have been missing out on a way to create real lasting wealth. "I've left it late," Tom thought to himself, but better late than never. The idea that dividends could one day pay for his bills, cover his groceries, or even fund his future retirement without touching his savings was a game changer. The crossover point, where his passive income from dividends would surpass his living expenses, suddenly became his new goal. And although 50 wasn't young, he still had time to make a significant difference. Tom's first obstacle was his total lack of financial knowledge. His understanding of the stock market was minimal, just the occasional headline about the Dow Jones or something about tech stocks. But Tom wasn't about to let that stop him. He dived into learning with the same determination that had kept him going through years of hard work. He started with books on personal finance and investing basics. At first, the jargon overwhelmed him. Terms like yield, P/E ratio, and dividend aristocrats felt like a foreign language. But with each day, the concepts began to click. He learned about companies that paid regular dividends and how the best ones increased those payouts year after year. He discovered the beauty of compounding, how reinvesting his dividends could snowball his returns over time. Tom knew he had to act fast if he wanted to catch up. His 401k was decent, but far from enough to support him comfortably in retirement. He had some savings, but they weren't working for him. They were just sitting there. So he started devising a plan to funnel as much money as possible into investments, all while living more frugally than ever before. First, he analyzed his outgoings. He trimmed unnecessary subscriptions, reduced his energy bills, and started eating more meals at home. Every dollar saved became a dollar to invest. Tom also made a conscious decision to downsize his lifestyle. He sold his second car and canceled any luxuries he didn't need. What others might have seen as a sacrifice, he saw as a path to freedom. Each month, his brokerage account grew larger, and soon he was buying stocks in companies that paid solid dividends. He focused on well-established dividend-paying companies, household names that had weathered market storms, and continued to reward shareholders. The frugal years. Tom's new routine took some adjusting, especially when his friends invited him out or talked about their latest purchases. They were still living the high-spending life that he had left behind. While they were traveling, buying new gadgets, or dining out, Tom stayed disciplined, constantly reminding himself of the bigger picture. Some nights it was hard. There were moments when Tom questioned whether he was on the right path. After all, this was a big lifestyle shift. But every time he saw his dividend payments come in, even if they were small at first, it reaffirmed his belief that this was the right choice. Steady progress. As the years passed, Tom began to see real progress. By age 55, his dividend portfolio was finally showing signs of growth. He reinvested every payout, letting the compounding work in his favor. Slowly but surely, his dividends began to increase in size, and Tom started to envision what life might look like once those payouts could cover his expenses. Every month, his goal came closer, the crossover point, where his passive income from dividends would exceed his daily living costs. It still felt far off, but Tom was determined. He focused on dividend growth stocks, those that consistently raised their payouts over time, and diversified his portfolio to reduce risk. Reaching the goal. By the time Tom hit 60, he had made it. The crossover point, once a distant dream, was now his reality. His dividends, steadily growing over the last decade, were enough to cover his utility bills, groceries, and other living expenses. The day he saw that he had earned more in dividends than he had spent that month was one of the most satisfying moments of his life. The sense of financial freedom washed over him like a wave. He hadn't struck it rich, but he had something even more valuable: control over his financial future. His hard work and discipline had paid off. He continued reinvesting the dividends that weren't needed, growing his portfolio further. Now, each month brought more than the last, and Tom's stress over money vanished. A new perspective. Looking back, Tom couldn't believe how much his life had changed after that random evening when he stumbled upon the program about dividend investing. A single spark of knowledge had lit a fire that transformed his entire financial future. While he sometimes wished he had started earlier, he was living proof that it was never too late to change your financial destiny. Tom's story became an inspiration to those around him. Friends and family who once dismissed his new frugal lifestyle began to ask him for advice. And whenever someone said, "I'm too old to start investing," Tom would smile, shake his head, and tell them his story. Because in the end, what mattered wasn't when you started, but that you started at all. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe to the channel.